I'm sipping red wine at a candlelit table, savoring every second of peace. While back home, my family's scrambling. Napkins in heaps, candles unlit. Their fancy party falling apart because I didn't show up to save it. Hi, I'm Elowen. Just the daughter they forgot to invite but still expected to set the stage for their big night. What started as a sting of being left out turned into the moment I chose me. And oh, did it shake them up. Want to know how I went from their invisible fixer to a guest at their table? Stick around and tell me in the comments, have you ever had to step away to be seen? The coffee was still warm in my hands, its steam curling up past the edge of my favorite chipped mug when my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced over, half expecting a spam call, but there it was, Celine's name glowing on the screen. My stomach did a little flip, not out of surprise but habit. Mom never calls just to chat. I set the mug down, the ceramic clinking softly against the wood, and swiped to answer, bracing myself for whatever she'd need this time. "Elowen," she started, her voice crisp as the November air outside my Raleigh apartment. "Tomorrow's Kieran's big promotion dinner. I need you here by 4 to set the table. His firm's top brass are coming, and we're doing it right with shrimp cocktail, aged bourbon, the whole VIP spread." I leaned against the counter, the pumpkin spice candle flickering nearby, its scent wrapping around me like a blanket I wasn't sure I wanted. She'd done this before, called me up like I was the family's personal fixer. Last time, it was folding 50 napkins into perfect triangles for Kieran's graduation party. My fingers cramped by the end while he basked in the spotlight. I took a breath, the question slipping out before I could stop it. "So, am I on the guest list this time?" There was a pause, just long enough for me to notice the gray sky pressing against my window, the fallen leaves piling up in messy drifts. "Oh, honey," she said, her tone sharp enough to slice through the quiet. "It's Kieran's night, his VP boss, some high-roller clients. It's not really your crowd." My fingers tightened around the phone, the edges digging into my palm. Not my crowd. Like I was silly for even asking. Like I hadn't spent years making their nights shine. She kept going, steamrolling over the silence. "You've got such a knack for these things. Candles, napkins, making it all look just so. Come in, set it up, and we'll take it from there." I could picture her in the kitchen, probably already pacing, her apron tied tight, her mind on the crystal glasses and not on me. The candle's flame danced, throwing shadows across my little place. Cozy, sure, but suddenly too small for the ache starting to bloom in my chest. I mumbled something like, "okay," and hung up, the call ending with a soft beep that felt louder than it should. I stood there, staring at the work emails still open on my laptop, the cursor blinking like it was waiting for me to catch up. My coffee had gone lukewarm, but I took a sip anyway, letting the bitter edge settle on my tongue. She hadn't even asked if I was free, just assumed I'd drop everything, same as always. I thought about the last family dinner I'd prepped, how I'd spent hours arranging the centerpiece while Kieran swaggered in late, grinning as Dad clapped him on the back. I'd slipped out before dessert, unnoticed, the clink of their laughter following me to the car. The words she'd tossed out, "You wouldn't fit in," kept circling, each loop cutting a little deeper. I wasn't a guest in their world, just the hands that polished it. I set the mug down harder than I meant to, the sound sharp against the hum of the fridge. Outside, a gust scattered the leaves, and I watched them tumble, free but directionless. Maybe that's what stung most, not just being left out, but being needed only for what I could do, not who I was. Life's funny that way. We spend so much time lifting others up, we forget to save a spot for ourselves. I drifted to the window, the gray light softening the edges of my reflection. The pumpkin spice smell lingered, warm and familiar, but it couldn't touch the restless thing waking up inside me, a quiet, stubborn spark I hadn't felt in years. I'd built a life here, small as it was, and yet I was still their go-to, their invisible thread holding it all together. My phone sat silent now, but its weight pulled at me, a tether I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. I turned back to the candle, its flame steady despite the draft, and found myself wondering, Why am I always the one they call, but never the one they keep around? I woke to the sharp buzz of my phone, vibrating against the nightstand, pulling me out of a restless half-sleep. The clock blinked 7:32 a.m., and as I rubbed my eyes, a swarm of texts from Celine lit up the screen, each one landing like a pebble in my already churning gut. I stumbled into the kitchen, the faint smell of burnt toast lingering from a distracted attempt at breakfast, and squinted at the messages. Elowen, grab extra napkins on your way. Followed by, Kieran's VP is coming tonight. Make sure that table sparkles. No good morning, no, if you've got a minute. Just orders stacking up like a sink full of dirty plates. I flicked on the kettle, watching steam rise as the golden leaves outside my Raleigh window caught the morning sun. My mind drifted back to last Thanksgiving, when I'd sat alone in this very spot, picking at a microwave turkey dinner, while my phone pinged with her demand for extra gravy. I'd driven across town in the cold, dropped it off, and left without a bite of the pie they were all laughing over. The kettle whistled, snapping me back, and I poured hot water over a tea bag, my hands moving on autopilot while something heavier brewed inside me. By 9, I was downtown, the air crisp and the streets humming with Friday life. I slid into a booth at Brew and Bean, the coffee shop's warm haze of steamed milk wrapping around me like a hug I didn't know I needed. Juniper was already there, her wild curls spilling over a scarf the color of ripe apples. She pushed a latte my way, her eyes narrowing as I slumped into the seat. "You look like you've been run over," she said, leaning in. I let out a dry laugh, stirring the foam. "Mom's on me again. Napkins, table settings, the usual drill for Kieran's big night." Her brow arched, and she set her cup down with a soft clink. "They've got you running around like hired help. When do you get to sit down and enjoy your own life?" Her voice carried that spark, bold and unapologetic, daring me to see what she saw. I took a sip, the warmth spreading through me, but it couldn't loosen the knot. Her words tightened. She was right, too right, and it made me fidget with the edge of my sleeve. "They just expect it," I muttered, glancing out at a couple strolling past arm in arm. Juniper leaned closer, her tone softening but firm. "Expectations can wear you thin, hun. You've got to claim your own space sometime." I nodded, slow and uncertain, her words sinking in like seeds in cracked soil. We've all got our burdens, but it's the ones we choose to carry that shape who we become. Back at my apartment by noon, I stood in the kitchen, the burnt toast still sitting cold on its plate. My phone pinged again, not Celine this time, but a notification from that reservation app I hadn't opened in months. "The Oak Room, 7 p.m., table for 1, it suggested, like it knew me better than I knew myself. I hovered over the screen, my thumb trembling above the reserve button. The Oak Room, dark wood, soft lights, a place I'd loved once but hadn't visited in ages. My heart thudded, loud against the quiet hum of the fridge. I could see Celine's face if I didn't show up at 4, her lips pursed tight. I could hear Kieran's smug chuckle if the napkins weren't perfect, but Juniper's voice echoed louder, daring me to think bigger. I tapped reserve, the screen flashing a confirmation before I could second-guess it. My breath caught, a rush of something wild and shaky flooding through me, like I'd just kicked down a door I'd been leaning against for years. I set the phone down, the burnt toast staring back at me, a charred little mirror of the burnout I'd been ignoring. The golden leaves outside swayed in a breeze, free and bright, and I felt that crack widen, the one I'd built to keep them happy, now letting a sliver of me peek through. I picked up the phone again, staring at the glowing 7 p.m. slot, my pulse racing like a runaway train. Would I really go through with it? Step out for myself tonight? Or just crumble under their weight like I'd done 100 times before? The clock on my wall ticked past 4, and I wasn't elbow deep in linen napkins or fussing over candle placements. Instead, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, zipping up that deep blue dress I hadn't worn in years, the one with the soft shimmer that caught the light just right. My pulse thumped hard, like I was a teenager sneaking out past curfew, every beat daring me to keep going. I smoothed the fabric over my hips, the rustle of it loud against the fading glow of my Raleigh apartment, and caught my own eyes in the reflection. They looked back, wide and uncertain, but alive. My phone lit up on the dresser at 4:05, Celine's name flashing like a warning siren. I picked it up, her voice spilling out before I could say hello. "Elewin, where are you? The first guests are pulling up." Her words were clipped, edged with that familiar panic she wore like a second skin. I swallowed, my throat tight, and managed a vague, "Don't worry, I've got it covered," before tapping the mute button. The silence that followed felt like a deep breath after holding it too long. I slipped the phone into my purse, grabbed my coat, and stepped out, my heels clicking sharp against the hardwood as the door clicked shut behind me. The evening air nipped at my cheeks as I drove downtown, Raleigh's golden leaves giving way to the soft hum of Friday night lights. I pulled into the Oak Room's lot just before 7, the warm glow of candlelight spilling out through the windows, the faint scent of roasted garlic curling into the crisp dusk. Inside, the hostess led me to a small table near the back, and I sank into the chair, the weight of the day sloughing off like an old coat. A waiter set a glass of red wine in front of me, its deep ruby catching the flicker of the flame beside it. I took a slow sip, letting the rich warmth roll over my tongue, and watched a couple across the room laugh over plates of filet mignon, their forks clinking softly. This was mine, my night, my peace, and it felt like slipping into a life I'd forgotten I could claim. Back at the house, though, I could almost see it unfolding in my mind's eye, sharp as a movie reel. Celine would be darting between the kitchen and dining room, her apron strings flapping as she barked at Gideon, "Get those candles lit, quick. Do you want them walking into a dark room?" He'd fumble with the matches, his big hands clumsy, muttering something about me being late. And Kieran, oh, Kieran, he'd be sprawled in the armchair, tie loosened, that smug grin plastered on his face. "Looks like she bailed again," he'd say, swirling his drink, same as he did when I skipped out on stacking chairs after his last big party. But then he'd glance at the table, half set, napkins in a messy pile, no shrimp cocktail plated yet, and that grin would falter, his brow creasing as the doorbell chimed with the first guests. I took another sip of wine, the glass cool against my lips, and let that image settle. They'd flail without me, scrambling to patch the holes I'd always filled, and here I was, steady and still, tasting freedom instead of their chaos. It wasn't spite that warmed me. It was the quiet truth sinking in. They needed me more than I'd ever needed their nods or their thanks. I'd spent so long propping up their moments, I'd forgotten how to stand in my own. Sometimes, stepping away is the only way to see what you're really worth. The waiter drifted by, offering a basket of warm bread, and I tore off a piece, the crust crackling under my fingers. Around me, the restaurant hummed, soft chatter, the clink of glasses, a woman's laugh rising over the low jazz in the background. My purse buzzed against the table, a steady vibration I knew was Celine. Her frustration probably boiling over by now. I didn't reach for it, didn't even flinch. Instead, I leaned back, the wine glass cradled in my hand, and pictured Kieran's smugness fading as he fumbled with a stack of plates, the reality hitting him square. I smiled into the candlelight, a small secret thing, wondering just how far that smirk of his would slip before the night was through. I jolted awake to a relentless buzz, my phone rattling against the bedside table like it was trying to shake me loose from sleep. The clock glowed 8:17 a.m., and sunlight slipped through the blinds of my Raleigh apartment, casting thin stripes across the quilt. I reached over, bleary-eyed, and froze when I saw the screen. A flood of missed calls, a dozen at least, and a single text from Gideon sitting there like a stone. "We're sorry, Elewin." My breath caught, fingers hovering over the words. Dad didn't apologize. Not ever. The last time he'd texted, it was a curt nudge to pick up Kieran's dry cleaning, and I'd done it without a peep. I swung my legs out of bed, the hardwood cold under my feet, and shuffled to the living room, still in last night's sweater. A faint wine stain marked the sleeve, a stubborn little reminder of my escape to the Oak Room, and I brushed at it absently as I scrolled through the notifications. Selene's voicemails piled up, 5 of them, her voice piercing even before I played one. "Elowen, where on earth are you? Everything's a mess." I winced, setting the phone down on the counter and let the quiet settle around me instead. The apartment felt still, almost too still, with just the hum of the heater and the soft rustle of leaves tapping the window outside. I brewed a pot of coffee, the rich smell curling through the air, and leaned against the sink, my mind drifting back to their house last night. I could see it clear as day. Selene storming through the kitchen, her hands waving like she could summon order out of thin air, her apron streaked with something from the stove. "Gideon, get that corkscrew working. We've got 10 minutes, she'd snap, while he'd hunch over the counter, big fingers slipping on the bottle, muttering under his breath about how I'd be there any second. And Kieran, lounging in the den with his feet up, probably tossed out a lazy, "she's not coming," figures, letting the chaos roll off him like water. I poured the coffee, the mug warming my hands, and wondered how long it took them to notice the table, napkins in a heap, candles dark, no one to make it right. By 9, I couldn't dodge it anymore. I dialed Gideon, my thumb hesitating over the call button just long enough to feel the weight of it. He picked up on the second ring, his voice low and gravelly like he'd barely slept. "Elowen," he said, and paused, a long, heavy pause that made me hold my breath. "Last night fell apart. Your mom's still fit to be tied, pacing around like a caged cat, but we didn't see it, how much you hold together." His words came slow, each one dragging a little, like he was pulling them up from somewhere deep. I set the mug down, the clink sharp in the stillness, and felt a quiet truth settle over me. The first time they'd ever looked past what I did to who I was. I stared out the window, sunlight glinting off the bare branches, and let his admission sink in. "It's okay, Dad," I said, softer than I meant to, my voice catching on the edges. "I just needed a night for me." He cleared his throat, a rough sound, and mumbled something about talking later before the line went dead. I stood there, the phone warm in my hand, picturing Selene in the background, her tight-lipped glare, her hands still flapping, too stubborn to let his regret soften her. She'd always been the steel in our family, bending us all to her will, but Dad's words cracked that armor, just a little. We carry so much for others, sometimes we don't notice until the load shifts, and they feel it too. The coffee had cooled by the time I took another sip, its bitterness sharper now. I tugged at the wine-stained sleeve, the fabric stiff under my fingers, a small badge of the night I'd claimed. My phone buzzed again, a single vibration against the counter. Selene, no doubt, her anger spilling over in another message I wouldn't read yet. I let it hum, unanswered, and leaned back, tracing the sunlight's path across the room. Kieran must have shrugged it off by now, I thought, but Dad's voice stuck with me, and I couldn't help wondering if Mom's pride would ever bend enough to feel what he did, or if she'd just keep pacing, blaming me for the mess they'd made without me. The buzz of my phone jolted me out of a lazy Tuesday scroll through the morning news, and I squinted at the screen as Selene's name popped up with a curt message. "Meet me at Brew and Bean, 2 p.m. My stomach gave a little twist. Not the sharp pang from last week's chaos, but a dull, wary ache. I tugged on my coat, the wool scratching at my neck, and stepped out into the Raleigh afternoon, bracing myself for her to unload over a couple of cold lattes. She'd dragged me to coffee before, years back after I'd skipped out on stacking chairs at Kieran's fundraiser cleanup, her eyes flashing as she lectured me over a plate of untouched scones. I pushed through the cafe door just after 2, the warm hum of espresso machines greeting me like an old friend. The air carried the sweet bite of cinnamon rolls fresh from the oven, and wooden tables gleamed under soft lights, scattered with folks nursing mugs and quiet conversations. Outside, bare trees swayed in a chilly breeze, their branches stark against the pale November sky. Selene was already there, perched at a corner table, her back straight as a ruler. She stirred her coffee too fast, the spoon clinking against the ceramic in a jittery rhythm, and barely glanced up as I slid into the seat across from her. I set my purse down, the leather creaking, and folded my hands, waiting for the storm I knew was coming. "You really threw us under the bus Friday night," she started, her voice tight, eyes fixed on the swirling foam. The words landed like a slap, quick and stinging, and I felt my jaw tighten. I leaned forward, elbows on the table, and cut in before she could build steam. "No, Mom, you threw me under it. I'm done being your errand runner." Her spoon froze mid-stir, her knuckles whitening around the handle, and she blinked at me, hard like I'd just flipped the table between us. The cafe's chatter faded to a dull buzz as I held her gaze, my chest tight but steady. I took a breath, the cinnamon scent grounding me, and pressed on. For years, it's been me, setting tables, fetching extras, making sure Kieran's every moment shines. When do I get to matter? My voice wobbled, a crack slipping through, but I kept it firm, my fingers digging into my palms under the table. Celine's lips parted, then closed, her eyes darting to the window as if the bare trees might hand her an answer. I could see the gears turning, her usual wall of certainty trembling. "I didn't show up Friday because I needed to breathe," I added, softer now, "and you didn't even notice until it all fell apart." She set the spoon down with a faint clatter, her hand lingering on the mug, gripping it like it was the only thing holding her together. Then her fingers loosened, sliding away, and her shoulders slumped just a fraction, a crack in the steel I'd always known her to be. "We leaned on you too much," she said, her voice low, almost swallowed by the hiss of the espresso machine. Her eyes dropped to the table, tracing the wood grain, and I caught a flicker of something rare. Regret, maybe, or just exhaustion. "I didn't think it hit you like that," she murmured, her usual sharpness dulled, like a blade left out in the rain. I leaned back, the chair creaking under me, and let her words settle. The waitress swung by, sliding a latte my way. Its foam swirled into a lopsided heart, and I wrapped my hands around it, the heat seeping into my skin. "I'm not saying I won't ever help," I said, meeting her gaze again, "but it's got to be my choice, not your command." My voice held steady this time, a line drawn in the sand I hadn't dared mark before. She nodded, slow and shaky, her lips pressing into a thin line. Not quite a smile, but not a fight either. A fragile peace hung between us, thin as the steam rising from our cups. She reached for her coffee again, took a sip, and set it down with a gentleness I wasn't used to seeing. "You've always been so good at pulling things together," she said, almost to herself, her fingers brushing the mug's handle. "I guess we forgot to look at the cost." I sipped my latte, the sweetness cutting through the bitter edge, and felt the knot in my chest loosen just a bit. We don't always see the wear on the ones we lean on, not until they step back and the whole frame wobbles. The cafe hummed around us, a couple at the next table laughing over a shared pastry, the sound softening the silence between us. Celine shifted in her seat, then stood, pulling her coat tight. "Let's not let this sit too long," she said, her tone lighter, and stepped around the table. She pulled me into a hug, awkward, her arms stiff at first, then warm as they softened around me. I hugged her back, the wool of her coat prickling my cheek, and stepped out into the chilly afternoon with her beside me, the bare trees still swaying. As I watched her climb into her car, waving once through the window, I couldn't shake the question lingering in my mind. Would this hold, this shaky truce we'd carved out, or would it fade like the foam on my latte by next week? I pulled up to my parents' house just as the December dusk settled, the porch lights casting a golden glow across the frost-dusted lawn. It was a month since that cafe talk with Celine, and I stepped out of the car empty-handed. No napkins, no candles, just a simple invite tucked in my pocket to sit with them. I paused on the walkway, my breath puffing white in the chilly air, and let that sink in. For once, I wasn't here to fix anything, and it felt like a dream I'd never let myself have. Last Christmas, I'd hovered by their punch bowl, ladling refills while Kieran crowed about his latest bonus, my hands sticky and my smile tight. Tonight, I wouldn't touch a ladle. The front door swung open before I could knock, and Selene stood there, her apron swapped for a soft red sweater, a tentative smile breaking through her usual brisk edge. "Come on in. It's all ready," she said, stepping aside with a wave of her hand. I crossed the threshold, the warm scent of roasted chicken wrapping around me like a welcome, and caught sight of the little Christmas tree twinkling in the corner of their Raleigh living room. Its lights danced off the walls, a mix of red and gold, and I felt my shoulders ease as I slipped off my coat. The dining room table sat just beyond, napkins folded unevenly, candles tilting in their holders. A mess by my old standards, but theirs now, not mine. Gideon shuffled in from the kitchen, a bottle of red wine in one hand and a grin splitting his weathered face. "Elowen, good to see you," he said, his voice warm as he set the bottle down and started pouring, the liquid glugging softly into glasses. He handed me one, the glass cool against my palm, and leaned back in his chair. "Remember that winter you took a header over your sled? Darn near buried yourself in the snowbank?" His chuckle rumbled low, and I laughed too, the memory flickering bright. Me, 8 years old, sprawled in a drift, giggling through chattering teeth. Kieran slid into the seat across from me, his tie loose but his usual swagger dimmed. He nodded at Dad's story, sipping his wine without a word, no trace of that cocky grin I'd braced for. We passed around the chicken, the platter clinking against the table, and I took a bite, the savory warmth spreading through me. Selene sat at the head, her hands resting instead of flitting, and watched us with a quiet I hadn't seen in her before. The meal rolled on, easy and slow, the kind of night where the clatter of forks felt like music. When Gideon cleared the plates, he came back with a store-bought apple pie, crust a little lopsided, nothing I'd have baked, and set it down with a wink. "No fuss tonight," he said, slicing it up. I took a piece, the cinnamon sharp on my tongue, and smiled at the simplicity of it. No hours of rolling dough, just us around a table that didn't need me to shine. Selene reached for her glass, then paused, her fingers brushing mine as she leaned closer. "It's good having you here. Elowen, just you, like this," she said, her voice soft, almost fragile. Her touch lingered, light but steady, and I felt a weight lift, one I'd carried so long I'd forgotten its shape. I looked around, at her eyes crinkling with something like pride, at Gideon's easy laugh, at Kieran's quiet nod, and saw them seeing me, not the hands that set their stage, but the person sitting here, whole. It's a rare gift, I thought, to be known not for what you give, but for who you are when you stop giving. The tree lights blinked, casting a glow over the crooked napkins and uneven candles, their imperfections a testament to a night they'd built without me. Kieran set his glass down, his fingers tapping the stem once before stilling, and I caught a flicker of something in his glance. Respect, maybe, or just a truce. Selene stood to clear the pie plates, waving me off when I started to rise. "Stay put," she said, her tone firm but kind, and I settled back, the chair creaking under me, letting her take the lead. The evening wound down with the clink of dishes in the sink and the murmur of their voices, a rhythm I didn't have to steer. I stepped outside later, the cold biting at my cheeks as I climbed into my car. The porch lights faded in the rear view and I drove into the dark, a grin spreading across my face, wide, free, like I'd just unlocked a door I'd never known was mine. The road stretched ahead, quiet and open, and I felt the space of it, all this room to breathe after years of holding it in. As the city lights twinkled on the horizon, I let my mind wander, wondering what I'd chase next now that I wasn't tethered to their needs. A trip somewhere warm, maybe, or just more nights like this, mine to fill however I pleased. As I drove away from their house that December night, the warmth of their crooked table and Selene's quiet words lingered with me, a glow brighter than the Christmas lights fading in the mirror. It took stepping back to show them, and me, that love isn't just in the doing, but in the seeing. Sometimes we find our place not by carrying the load, but by letting others lift it too. If this little journey of mine stirs something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe over a cup of coffee or just a note shared between us old souls.